I've learned to never ignore trash at a crime scene. People tend to think that the most important clues are in bloodstains, broken glass, or the body itself. But more often than not, the truth lies in what was thrown away. That's exactly what happened in the case I still call the timer in the trash. It was supposed to be a simple arson investigation. A small house on the outskirts of town had gone up in flames around 2 a.m. The fire department responded fast, but not fast enough. Inside, they found the charred remains of a woman, late 30s, single, worked from home. Her name was Helena Villar. No signs of forced entry and no witnesses. Everything pointed to an accident, a faulty heater, maybe a cigarette left burning. But when I walked into the scene the next morning, I felt something was off. The fire had started in the living room, not the kitchen or near any heating appliance. The burn pattern on the floor and walls was too clean, too controlled. It didn't look accidental. It looked planned. While the rest of the team examined structural damage and electrical sources, I walked through the wreckage alone. There's a silence that follows a fire, a strange, heavy silence, like the house is still holding its breath. And in that silence, I looked for what didn't belong. In the kitchen, I found the trash can, half melted, warped by the heat, but still standing. Most would have skipped it. But I dug through the blackened waste with gloves and tweezers. That's when I found it. A small kitchen timer. The kind you'd use to bake cookies or time your laundry. It was partially melted, plastic casing deformed, but the dial was still visible, set to 10 minutes. What was a timer doing in the trash? And why had it been discarded in a rush, without being fully damaged by the fire? I bagged it. Something about it gnawed at me. That night, back at the lab, I cleaned the timer. Under the soot, we found a faint trace of accelerant residue. Gasoline. The timer had been near fuel. That's when the pieces started to click. I pulled Helena's phone records, security cam footage from nearby houses. Anything I could find. A neighbor's motion-activated camera caught a blurry image of someone walking toward Helena's house the night of the fire. Hooded, carrying something in their hands. The problem? Helena's front door showed no forced entry, and her back door had a simple latch. She either let someone in or the person had a key. We interviewed friends, co-workers, family. Her ex-boyfriend, Andre, was cooperative. Too cooperative. He was calm, helpful, even offered to provide photos and emails from the past. But something about his attitude was rehearsed, too perfect. And then we found something that broke his script, the timer. When confronted, Andre hesitated for the first time. He claimed it was a common model, that it could belong to anyone. But under lab analysis, we recovered a partial fingerprint embedded in the melted plastic. It was his, clear as daylight. That blew the case wide open. Digging into his background, we found out he had purchased gasoline the day before the fire, and a second security cam at a gas station caught him filling a red canister. The receipt timestamp was 9:42 p.m. He had rigged the fire, using the timer as a crude delay device. He had placed it near a small pool of gasoline in the living room, set to go off hours later. He left the house, created his alibi, and assumed the fire would destroy any trace of it. But he had tossed the timer into the kitchen trash before leaving, maybe in a moment of panic, or maybe assuming it would melt beyond recognition. That small miscalculation destroyed his entire plan. The prosecution built their case around that one piece of evidence. A $5 timer, found in the trash, survived the heat and exposed a premeditated murder disguised as an accident. Andre was convicted of arson and murder, sentenced to life. Every time I think about that case, I remember how fragile perfect crimes really are. The smartest criminals forget that details betray them. They focus on the fire. I look for what's left behind. And sometimes that's all it takes. It was a sunny Thursday morning when I was called to a homicide in a middle-class neighborhood. The kind of place where neighbors wave, dogs bark politely, and the sound of kids on bicycles is the loudest disturbance you'll get. But that day, everything was wrong. The victim was a man in his 40s, Ricardo Tavares. He was found in the living room of his neatly kept home, a single gunshot wound to the chest. No sign of forced entry. No defensive wounds. No witnesses. It had the markings of a planned execution, cold, quick, and clean. But what caught my eye wasn't the body. It was a birthday cake. Sitting in the center of the kitchen table, surrounded by balloons, party hats, and unopened paper plates, was a small chocolate cake. Perfectly made, no candles, no writing. Just there, untouched. There were no kids in the house. Ricardo didn't have children, and his birthday, according to his ID, was in September. This was March. So whose birthday was being celebrated? That was the first crack in the illusion. I began my walk through the house, noting the little inconsistencies. There were 2 coffee cups in the sink. One had lipstick on the rim. In the trash, I found wrapping paper, but no gift. The living room rug had been shifted slightly, hiding a bloodstain underneath. Someone had tried to clean. The forensics team focused on the bullet. It was a small caliber round, fired at close range. No shell casing, which meant the shooter had either used a revolver or had collected the evidence. Professional? Maybe, but there was something personal about this scene. The cake wasn't distraction, it was a statement. I checked the security cameras from nearby homes. One neighbor had footage of a woman entering Ricardo's home the night before. Late 30s, black coat. She stayed for nearly 3 hours. Left just before midnight. No signs of struggle on video, just a calm visit. That ruled out a break-in. So a guest. I reviewed Ricardo's phone records. One number stood out. Dozens of calls in the last 2 months. Registered to a woman named Sonia Alves. Divorced. 1 son. When we brought her in for questioning, she admitted to knowing Ricardo. They had been seeing each other casually. But according to her, he ended things suddenly a few weeks ago. She wasn't emotional. She was controlled. That's always a flag for me. People who are too in control during a tragedy often aren't attached. They're hiding something. We got a warrant for her house. Nothing unusual until we checked the freezer. There was a missing section in the middle tray. You could see the faint impression where a cake box had once sat. Chocolate, round, the same size as the one at Ricardo's. That's when it started to make sense. She had planned a celebration, a last meeting, not to reconcile, but to punish. A toxicology report on Ricardo's body confirmed traces of a sedative, mixed in his drink, most likely. That would explain why there were no signs of a struggle. She poisoned him lightly, waited until he was disoriented, then shot him. But why the birthday setup? That answer came from her ex-husband, who revealed something chilling. Her son, Lucas, had died 2 years earlier, hit by a car, March 16th, the same day as the murder. His favorite cake? Chocolate. His favorite activity? Blowing out candles with his mom. She hadn't been celebrating Ricardo's birthday. She had been recreating her son's last birthday, with Ricardo as a stand-in. Psychological projection. Grief turned into rage. It all added up horribly when confronted with the evidence. Sonia didn't deny it. She only said, "He promised me he'd be there for me, and then he walked away. Just like my boy." I've seen a lot of violent crimes, but this one stayed with me because it reminded me that not all killers are monsters in the shadows. Sometimes they're just people who break in a moment of unbearable pain and take someone else down with them. It started with a birthday cake that didn't belong, and it ended with a life taken. It was one of those mornings where everything felt too quiet. No wind, no clouds, just a heavy stillness in the air. The call came in just after 7 a.m., an apparent suicide in a downtown apartment. A man had fallen from the 5th floor. Open and shut, or at least that's what it looked like. But I've learned over the years that the most obvious explanations usually hide the most disturbing truths. The victim was Carlos Meneses, 51 years old, found in the alley behind his building, lying face up, arms strangely tucked to his sides. The fall alone wasn't what caught my attention. It was the umbrella, lying neatly beside his body, fully closed, with not a single drop of rain in sight. It hadn't rained in days. The forecast was clear. No clouds, no storm. Why carry an umbrella on a dry, cloudless morning? That was the first thread I pulled. I entered the building to the back entrance, and the doorman recognized me. He was visibly shaken. Told me Carlos was a private man, no visitors, no noise. Lived alone since his divorce. No pets, no parties, just routines. Routines that didn't include falling out of windows. When I entered Carlos's apartment, I noticed how clean it was. Not just tidy, obsessively organized. Books stacked by size, shoes aligned by brand and year, mail unopened but sorted by sender. It looked like the home of someone who liked control. But one thing was out of place. The living room window. It was wide open. The one he had supposedly jumped from. But something didn't sit right. There were no fingerprints on the edge of the windowsill. No scuff marks on the floor from climbing up. Nothing. Just open glass, like someone wanted it to look like he jumped. I turned back to the umbrella. It was made of black nylon with a wooden handle. Expensive. Inside the handle, we found a hollow compartment. A hidden cavity that held a small flash drive. That's when the real story began to unfold. The drive contained hundreds of scanned documents. Bank statements, property records, internal memos, all connected to a major construction firm in Sao Paulo. A firm currently under investigation for embezzlement. Carlos wasn't just a quiet man. He was an auditor. He had discovered something big. The file showed a trail of money moving through offshore accounts, shell companies, and falsified contracts. And he was preparing to go public. I called his ex-wife. She hadn't spoken to him in over a year, but she said he had become paranoid, looking over his shoulder, avoiding phone calls. Mentioned something about the people upstairs watching him. We checked the computer. Wiped clean. Not a single file remained. Someone had erased everything. That made the flash drive and the umbrella not only important. It was the only copy left. As we dug deeper, surveillance footage from the building revealed the final clue. At 4:37 a.m., someone entered Carlos's floor using the stairwell. A man in a dark hoodie, gloves, and a messenger bag. He was inside for 11 minutes. No footage of him leaving. But here's the twist. He never left because he never exited through the front. He left through Carlos's window. The killer had made it look like Carlos jumped. But the fall trajectory was off. Carlos didn't fall. He was pushed. And whoever did it knew exactly what they were doing. The umbrella was planted, but they had missed one detail. They thought it was just a prop. They didn't know what was inside the handle. We traced the flash drive contents to a former partner at the construction firm, a man who had gone missing 3 months prior, presumed dead. But a week after Carlos's death, that man reappeared. Only now with a new identity in Argentina and access to a massive account linked to one of the firms exposed by Carlos's documents. Turns out, Carlos wasn't just an auditor. He was a whistleblower, and he knew his time was short. That's why he built a flash drive into something no one would question. A simple umbrella. But it was sunny. That's what ruined it. That umbrella didn't belong on that day. It didn't match the weather. And that tiny mistake, that overlooked inconsistency, broke the illusion. It told us the whole story. That Carlos never had a chance to blow the whistle, but he made sure someone else could. I kept the umbrella, not as a souvenir, but as a reminder. Sometimes, the most silent objects scream the loudest truths. There's something about silence that unsettles me, especially when it's the kind that should have been broken by a sound that never came. That morning, I was called to a home in a quiet suburb of Maryland, upper middle class, clean, peaceful. The kind of neighborhood where neighbors wave but don't really know each other, and the HOA keeps the lawns manicured like military precision. The victim was Rebecca Langford, 37, a prominent criminal defense attorney. Found dead in her master bedroom by her husband at exactly 6:12 a.m. That timestamp stuck with me because it was oddly precise. He told dispatchers, "I woke up at 6:12 and realized something was wrong." Strange. Most people under trauma round up or down. This was surgically exact. When I got there, the house was pristine. Too pristine. Not a drawer out of place. Not a speck of dust. But what grabbed my attention wasn't the crime scene. It was what wasn't there. No signs of forced entry. No broken windows. The house had a state-of-the-art security system. Motion detectors. Door sensors. Glass break monitors. But no alarm had gone off. Nothing. Rebecca had been stabbed twice. Clean cuts. No defensive wounds. Which suggested she either never saw it coming or knew the person who did it. Her husband, Tom Langford, was the one who found her. He claimed he'd been sleeping in the guest room because they had an argument the night before. Said he woke up, made coffee, and went to check on her when she didn't come down. Calm. Too calm. I checked the home security panel. It had been armed at 10:04 p.m. the night before, just like Tom had said, but there was no record of it being deactivated. No motion triggers. No alerts. Still, someone had entered that bedroom and killed her. Then came the twist. The system had an override mode, something only accessible through a hidden maintenance feature. It allowed you to place the alarm into test mode without setting off alerts. This option was supposed to be used by technicians or by the registered owner. Only two people had that level of access, Rebecca and Tom. When we pulled logs from the security company, they showed the system had been placed into test mode at 3:42 a.m. No alerts, no beeps, just silence. 8 minutes earlier, Tom had searched on his phone. DigiGuard 800 disable alarm test mode override. He'd tried to wipe that search, but not before the digital forensics team pulled it from backup. Still, motive was thin. That was until we got into Rebecca's emails. She was knee-deep in a high-profile whistleblower case against a logistics firm based in Virginia. Millions in fraud, bribery, tax evasion. Rebecca wasn't just offending a client. She was preparing to blow the case wide open. 3 days before her death, she received a threat. No police report, but she forwarded the email to Tom with a note. "If anything happens to me, the truth is in the folder labeled Red List." The file was gone, deleted, scrubbed, but our team recovered fragments, and buried in those was a contract. Tom's name. His consulting firm had received $250,000 from the same company Rebecca was preparing to expose. The night of the murder, they fought. She'd found the contract. Called him out. That was the moment everything unraveled. He disabled the system, went upstairs, and made it look like nothing ever happened. But like I said, silence can scream louder than any siren. It wasn't just what the alarm didn't say. It was what his phone did, what the security logs did, what the timestamps whispered between the gaps. Tom was arrested 3 weeks later, but justice came in layers. Rebecca had already mailed a USB drive to a reporter in D.C. The Red List went public. Dozens of indictments followed. The company collapsed. People resigned. And Tom? He was charged with murder and obstruction. Now, when I walk into a silent crime scene, I listen harder. Not for what I hear, but for what I don't. Because sometimes the quietest places hold the loudest truths. I still remember the smell of that garage, or rather, the absence of it. It was a quiet Tuesday morning in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, a wealthy neighborhood. 2-story houses with trimmed hedges, retirees walking golden retrievers, American flags fluttering above porches. The kind of place where crime feels foreign. Detective Parker and I had been called to a supposed suicide. A man named Howard Langston, 52, retired chemist, had been found dead in his own garage. His wife, Denise, had dialed 911 after returning from a weekend yoga retreat in Asheville. She said she found the garage door shut, the house empty, and a strange smell coming from inside. When we arrived, the first thing I noticed was what was there, but what wasn't. Garages are messy by nature. Sawdust, oil stains, dead bugs in the corners. But Howard Langston's garage looked like a showroom. Not just clean, sterile. The cement floor gleamed. Tools hung perfectly spaced on the walls. Labeled drawers held everything from zip ties to wrenches. And no dust. Not on a single surface. That was the first red flag. Howard's body was lying near the back of the garage, slumped against a shelving unit. He had a plastic bag over his head, cinched with a zip tie around the neck. A small canister of nitrogen gas lay next to him, its valve open. No signs of struggle, no visible wounds. At first glance, it looked like a peaceful suicide, but I've seen too many peaceful suicides that were staged. I crouched down beside the body. Howard's skin had a slight bluish tint, consistent with asphyxiation, and the bag was still clinging slightly to his face, meaning it was placed while he was still breathing. No fingerprints on the valve, not even Howard's. Latex gloves, maybe, but none were found on site. I turned my attention back to the garage. That unnatural cleanliness kept pulling at me. Denise claimed Howard was a neat freak. Fair, but even neat freaks don't wax their garage floors weekly. Then I saw it. A patch of the floor behind the car, barely perceptible, looked slightly shinier than the rest. I ran my glove across it. No dust, not even residual particles. That's when it clicked. This wasn't just clean, it had been cleaned. Recently, thoroughly. We brought in luminol. The results lit up like a Christmas tree. Whoever had killed Howard had cleaned meticulously, but they missed the grout lines. There had been blood, more than a typical suicide would cause. The shelving unit behind Howard had fine misting patterns too, a backspatter, consistent with a blunt force trauma, not gas asphyxiation. Now it was a homicide. I questioned Denise again. She said Howard was depressed, withdrawn, obsessed with the idea of dying without mess. She mentioned the nitrogen setup had been something he'd researched. I asked her if he ever talked about cleaning the garage. She blinked. He always kept it clean. When I pressed her when he cleaned it last, she hesitated. I don't remember. We pulled home security footage. Curiously, the feed for Saturday and Sunday was corrupted. Technical error, said the home system provider. But Friday night's footage showed Howard entering the garage at 10:43 p.m. He never came back out. But here's the thing. The door sensor for the side door triggered twice on Saturday afternoon. Someone had been in there, while Howard was presumably dead on the floor. We canvassed the neighbors. One, a retired Air Force engineer named Mr. Talbot, mentioned seeing a white van parked briefly in front of the Langston house Saturday around 2 p.m. No logos, tinted windows. The footage from a neighbor's Ring camera confirmed it, but the plate was removed. The scene was professional. Too professional. Like someone used to making crime scenes vanish. Then came the twist. Howard Langston, despite being retired, had an encrypted external drive hidden in a false wall behind a shelving unit in the garage. It took days, but our digital team cracked part of it. He had been working on a private project for a biomedical firm. Gene editing, human applications, the kind of stuff not cleared by ethics boards. And he'd been planning to whistleblow. Emails revealed he was set to meet with a journalist on Monday. He never made it. Someone, maybe from the company, maybe a third party, got to him first, made it look like suicide, cleaned up, overestimated their ability to erase every trace. Denise was never charged. Her alibi checked out, but she moved away 3 weeks later. No forwarding address. To this day, the murder remains officially unsolved. But I know what I saw. The absence of dust told me someone had scrubbed the truth away. Almost